Top Trump administration officials gathered at the vice president's residence on Wednesday evening as they continue to weigh whether to publish an audio recording and transcript of Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's recent conversation with Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Three sources familiar with the meeting told CNN that the administration's handling of the Epstein case, as well as the need to craft a unified response, is expected to be a main focus of the dinner. The meeting will include Vice President J.D. Vance, Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Mr. Blanche. For more on this, our correspondent Wyatt Sharpe reports.
The House Oversight Committee has intensified its push for clarity on a case that refuses to fade from public view. In early August 2025, the committee issued an expansive subpoena to the Department of Justice, demanding files related to Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking investigation, including the 2007 plea agreement, relevant communications, and internal deliberations due back by August 19th. At the same time, subpoenas went to a range of prominent figures: former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former FBI directors James Comey and Robert Mueller, and multiple past attorneys general from both parties. What's especially striking, Alexander Acosta, who negotiated the controversial 2008 non-prosecution deal that halted federal charges and limited Epstein's prison time, was not included on the subpoena list. The subpoena follows a long history of scrutiny over the 2008 plea deal. Epstein pleaded guilty in Florida state court to a pair of prostitution charges, narrowly avoiding federal prosecution. The agreement was later found to violate the Crime Victims' Rights Act because it kept secrets from the victims. The Oversight Committee has also subpoenaed Ghislaine Maxwell, requiring her to give a deposition in prison this fall. Maxwell's legal team has pushed back, seeking immunity and advance written questions, and suggesting she will otherwise invoke her Fifth Amendment rights. Beyond depositions, lawmakers are focused on a set of files the DOJ released in July, firmly rejecting the notion of a client list. In an official memo, the department said no credible evidence was found that Epstein kept a list of powerful individuals for blackmail, nor that any uncharged third parties were implicated. Still, skepticism persists. Critics questioned the integrity of the evidence, including video footage of Epstein's time in jail. Independently verified analysis found nearly 3 minutes missing from the FBI footage, which the department initially called raw. Committee Chair Representative James Comer has indicated that the subpoenas are an effort to restore public trust in the Justice Department and ensure transparency, not partisan politics. But some Democrats counter that Republicans are seeking to weaponize the investigation ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. If the DOJ refuses to comply with the subpoena by August 19th, the committee may pursue contempt proceedings against Attorney General Pam Bondi, heightening the political and legal stakes involved. This isn't simply a look back at Epstein's actions, but rather it's an attempt to untangle the network around him and to examine whether privilege, politics, or fear may have shaped key decisions. The authentication and release of documents, along with testimony from figures who have previously skirted scrutiny, could dramatically reshape the public's understanding of the case. Whether lawmakers get full cooperation or whether new barriers are raised remains to be seen. But with subpoenas issued and the DOJ deadline looming, Washington is bracing for revelations or further resistance. Wyatt Sharpe, The News Forum.
And Wyatt joins us now to break this down further. So, Wyatt, I want to start with the significance of this recording. What would that be, and why might it reveal? What might it reveal about the administration's handling of the Epstein case?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you're actually getting a lot of kind of back and forth over the recording specifically, and a lot of it has to do with because of the person who, of course, met with Ghislaine Maxwell, but also the person who was responsible for the recording of these conversations, and ultimately the person who will have the authority to end up potentially releasing the recordings. His name is Todd Blanche. He is the Deputy Attorney General appointed by President Trump, and a lot of people think, of course, that there's a conflict of interest with respect to this situation here because some people are speculating that Donald Trump himself could be implicated in some of these files. And so if the person responsible and the person who has the decision-making authority to potentially release the recording was himself appointed by Donald Trump, some people, of course, worrying that there could be a conflict of interest there. I think the other component to this is Ghislaine Maxwell, who has, of course, limited immunity with respect to the situation. Talked about the reports are suggesting upwards of about 100 different people critical in the recording and in the meetings that she had with Todd Blanche. And she did also state notably that she did not see Donald Trump do or, act in any way that would have went beyond what people might have deemed as ethical. Of course, there is some irony in all of this because, of course, she is potentially hoping for a pardon. So if she were to come out and accuse Donald Trump of doing something, then it would likely mean that Donald Trump would take the potentiality of a pardon off the table. So I don't think that her trying to say that Donald Trump is innocent in all of this should be taken as, the be all and end all necessarily. I certainly think there are still some other components of this that will need to be looked into and perhaps will need to be looked into by people other than, those who have been appointed by Trump.
Now, you mentioned that there is speculation that Donald Trump could be involved in the Jeffrey Epstein files, but why would the administration be hesitant to release this audio and transcript publicly if they're claiming that Donald Trump isn't involved?
So it's a very good question. And if you ask the administration, they're going to say it's because of legal sensitivities. They're going to say, that Ghislaine Maxwell obviously has a number of legal rights, as does any other person who could potentially be implicated in a criminal way. There's also the potentiality of needing to, kind of protect the grand jury secrecy as well and victim privacy. And so, the administration is saying that all of those things are going to potentially pose legal obstacles. I talked to a former Trump advisor a few days ago who knows the president. And I asked him, I said basically that exact question. I said, if Donald Trump is not implicated in these files, then why not just put it all behind us and release the files?
Right.
And of course, he said that it could be because there's people like children who could be implicated in some of these recordings. And again, I mean, I had a pretty tense back and forth with him just saying, well, if that's the case, then just redact the names of the children. Like there's a number of options that they could be doing that they don't seem to be willing to do, at least at this point in time. And so a lot of people are obviously, kind of drawing between the lines and saying that the obvious reason that they're not doing this is because of some of the political implications. It's politically risky as well, because not only could it reveal things about Donald Trump, but also about some of Donald Trump's close allies. And really just, I mean, I think this goes beyond Democrat and Republican, and I think it really just speaks to the elite class, if you will, within Washington. You mentioned, of course, that we saw the likes of Bill Clinton, the former president, the 42nd president, who's a Democrat, Hillary Clinton, his wife, the former Secretary of State, a number of other Democrats as well, who have been called before the House Oversight Committee to testify on the issue. So I think really right now you're not going to see too many of the, again, kind of elite class in Washington who are elected officials come out and advocate for the release of these files, because unfortunately the reality is a large portion of them could likely anyways be implicated.
And how involved has Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche been in this case tied to Epstein? And why is he speaking with Maxwell at all?
Well, like just to kind of paint a picture for you of how close the relationship is between Todd Blanche and Donald Trump, Blanche was Trump's personal attorney during a number of the different legal battles that he was facing. In the first administration, he worked in the White House before being appointed by Trump to serve as the Secretary of Labor. And then, of course, Trump gave him the position of Deputy Attorney General. So one thing with the Attorney General's position and kind of the Department of Justice more broadly is that they are supposed to be independent, even though they are political appointees, right? Even though Donald Trump or whoever the president is responsible for appointing them, they're supposed to act independent of the politics that are at play, independent of the president. And unfortunately, we haven't really seen that, not just with Todd Blanche, but of course also with Pam Bondi, who is the Attorney General, essentially Todd Blanche's boss. And people again who I've been talking to who are close to the White House have been saying that all of the decisions that are coming with respect to this case are coming straight from the West Wing. And so Pam Bondi's not going to do anything unless, someone from the West Wing, of course, probably the president comes out and says, this is what you have to do. So I think that's important to note as well. But again, Blanche, who was appointed to the role of Deputy Attorney General right after Donald Trump was inaugurated, his role essentially in interviewing Maxwell is the part that's kind of creating these optics that there is a conflict of interest in this situation. And then I think, the relationship that he is trying to form with both sides, because again, he needs to form a relationship, obviously, with Maxwell, even though people might not think it, because he wants Maxwell to reveal as much as possible, because he doesn't know what Maxwell knows. But of course, his number one loyalty, it's quite obvious, is to his main boss, which is Donald Trump and Pam Bondi.
And what role is Vice President J.D. Vance playing in these internal discussions? And does his presence at this meeting signal broader White House concern?
I think what the administration is trying to do right now is represent the Republican divide that is being seen over this issue, because, of course, you have a number of Republicans who have traditionally been very loyal to President Trump who have since come out and who have advocated for the release of these files. So I think, obviously, if it was Donald Trump hosting a meeting of this sort, he would kind of be all over the place. He would be telling some of the people a whole bunch of different reasons as to why the files aren't being released. Whereas I think actually what probably is the most likely is that some of the senior advisors to the president, again, some of those West Wing staffers, probably called the vice president and said, Mr. Vice President, we have a number of concerns. Are you able to harbor these concerns? Are you able to address some of these concerns with some of the people who are worrying about them? And so I think that's kind of the attempt that we're seeing from Washington right now to, again, put to bed some of these concerns. But the easiest way to do that is just to release the files and get Donald Trump's name out of it. Them not doing it suggests that, again, he might be implicated.
Well, Wyatt, thank you so much for breaking that down for us.
Thank you.